all about what rights, what sailors' rights and the experience of what sailors were like from these kinds of experiences. He eventually becomes a commander of a ship in the Mediterranean. Shortly before, he takes over command of a frigate on the eve of the War of 1812. He is stationed in New Orleans and is ordered to enforce the embargo in 1807 to 1808 and into 1809. So this is a career, right, in which it revolves around free trade and sailors' rights. Let's talk about his ship. This is a very special ship. It's a beautiful ship. This is a beautiful picture. This is the Essex, the USS Essex. It was built in Salem and was commissioned into the Navy during the Quasi-War. It was launched, I believe, in 1798. And its first assignment was to sail to the Indian Ocean. It's the first American naval vessel to sail into the Indian Ocean to escort in a convoy home a series of American merchant ships to make sure that the French don't attack it. This is a vessel that then is stationed in the Mediterranean during the wars, the Barbary Wars. This is a vessel, has one of the greatest anti-impressment stories on the eve of the War of 1812. In 1811, the Essex had been sent to Great Britain, was in Liverpool, and a deserter from the British Navy jumps the British ship and joins the crew. They're in the port of Liverpool. The guy was a deserter, right? And the British officers come aboard and ask for this man. Say, we know him, we want this man back. The American captain, not Porter, he agrees, okay. The man did not want to go back. He was told to go down below, get his things. He starts going down below, sees a hatchet. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to take the mic down first. Well, use the mic, okay. His hatchet. Picks up a hatchet, whack! Chops off his arm, his hand. The British decide not to take him. This is reported in American newspapers. This ship, long before Porter raised his banner from the masthead, free trade and sailors' rights, were in the timbers, in the bloodstains on the deck of the ship. This is important. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up. You know? I mean, sometimes stories are so good, you'd say, if I were a novelist, I could make this story up. But no, this is history. So let's move on a little bit. Porter was consumed with the idea of honor. And honor was very important to this generation of Americans. So David Porter, he had this history of sort of treating British sailors not so hot, which, if you think about it, he believes in sailors' rights, except for not British sailors. So at one point when he was in Malta during the 1806, 1807, and he was on a relatively small American vessel, one of the British sailors in port had insulted an American officer on his ship. He took the British sailor and flogged him on the deck. Local authorities were irate. And they said, we need to investigate this. You can't sell your ship until we investigate this matter. What does Porter do? Sails out of the harbor. Fire and be damned. Then, on the eve of the War of 1812, just as he's about to set sail, he calls his crew, he musters his crew and says, is any man here unwilling to pledge honor to defend the flag of the United States? One man says, sir? His name is John Irvin. I'm British and I don't want to fight the king. Okay, you can go ashore. But as he's being sent ashore, the crew tars and feathers him. If you're another British sailor, are you going to step forward? I apologize. The picture I want to get a picture of tarring and feathering. And that's a picture, an illustration from the Revolutionary War. It just gives you an idea of what it looks like. So historically, that's an inaccurate portrayal. There are no illustrations that I know of John Irvin's. But I did on the right, that would be your right side. That's a newspaper story describing the action of what happened. Porter sails on his first cruise. I can't make this stuff up. This stuff is the stuff of novels. In fact, Patrick O'Brian steals stuff from David Porter. Anybody know who Patrick O'Brian is? Patrick O'Brian writes a whole series of wonderful. I read every one of those suckers. It was 21 of them or something novels. The Jack Aubrey. How many of you seen the Master and Commander movie? All right, so this will be a resonance of things. So Porter's out on this cruise, very successful cruise. He captures a British ship, the Alert. His picture is totally distorted. Which is the bigger ship in the picture? The British ship. Porter's frigate was much bigger than the Alert. But what he had done is he disguised the Alert. Excuse me, he had disguised the Essex as a merchant ship, and the Alert tried to pounce in on him, and suddenly out come the cannons, right? And within minutes, the Alert is forced to surrender. The British weren't happy with this. They thought, Jack Aubrey aside, right? They thought this wasn't playing fair, although this was sort of standard naval practice in these days. So a British officer, Sir James Yeo, who commands a frigate, the Southampton, which is about the same size as Porter's Essex, issues a challenge. And it's a pretty nasty challenge. He says, please present my compliments to Captain David Porter, he declares that he would be glad to have a tete-a-tete, a head-to-head, anywhere between the Capes of Delaware and the Havana, where he would have the pleasure to break his own sword over his damned head and put him in irons, which would not be treating Porter with honor due an officer. Porter responds, and I respond with pleasure to your polite invitation. And then he says, Porter pledged his honor to Sir James that no other vessel shall interrupt their tete-a-tete. Porter, in an effort to make it plain that he would not disguise his flag this time, and he had raised this banner on his first voyage, but now he makes it public. He declared that his frigate may be known by a flag bearing the motto, free trade and sailors' rights. This story appears in newspapers up and down the coast, everywhere. The whole nation hears about this story. And now, suddenly, like a light bulb went on. Boom! Free trade and sailors' rights, that's what we're fighting for. That phrase, right there, Porter creates that phrase, that banner. And, from the halls of Congress, Henry Clay uses it, John C. Calhoun uses it, every tavern, every bar. You cannot walk into a town without seeing this banner displayed. Free trade and sailors' rights. That little phrase, it just sort of captures everything, the essence of what the Americans were fighting for. Next slide. And it is for here, just a little, we already did that. We'll go to the next one. Well, we need to place this in the context of what's happening in the War of 1812. Thomas Jefferson, at the beginning of the war, makes one of these incredibly stupid statements. I love Thomas Jefferson. I really do. But the stupidest thing he ever said was, our present enemy will have the sea to herself, and we shall be equally predominant at land. Never did he ever say anything more wrong. If you know anything about the War of 1812, we launch invasion after invasion into Canada, and it gets beaten back. The Canadians, right, Tom? What do they say? They say, we won the war because we beat you back. Yeah. Right? We beat you back. Yeah. Well, so the only place that we can, as a nation, can take pride is at sea. Because the United States engages in a series of battles at sea. Some of them are a little unfair because the United States, had developed something really which was a super frigate and just could outfight most of the British frigates. Give you an idea, the Essex for example, was not a super frigate. It was about 750 tons. Oh, maybe somebody knows it better than I. The Constitution, which is one of the super frigates, is about twice that size. It's about twice that size. But we engage in a series of battles, and we win them at sea. Two of these battles are of relevance to us here. One is the Constitution's battle against the Java, which is its second victory. It had previously won another ship-to-ship battle. Is it the Macedonian? Or is that the Gilje? Thank you. And off the banks of Brazil. The second battle that's of relevance, next one, is the Hornet versus the Peacock, which is off the coast of like Venezuela. The Hornet actually, this picture is again inaccurate. These prints are made and they're sold. The Hornet was a brig. If you know anything about ships in these days, brigs have 2 masts. How many masts do we see on? We see 3, but that's beside the point. These were, big triumphs. The reason why these are relevant is that on Porter's second cruise, he is ordered to go into the South Atlantic and rendezvous with the Constitution and the Hornet. Well, they fight these battles and go back. And so Porter sails into the South Atlantic. Next slide. Oh, excuse me. As you notice, I'm not looking at my notes. I'm relying on my PowerPoint to sort of lead me through my lecture. This is, there are these victories. And then starting in June 1, 1813, there are a series of defeats. And if not defeats, most of the American fleet, most American ships get bottled up into harbors. And that's almost the same thing as being captured, right? Because you can't sell them. And the most important of these battles is the Chesapeake versus the Shannon. Lawrence, who had commanded the Hornet, was given command of a frigate, and the Chesapeake was supposed to be a great frigate, if an unlucky ship. He sails out of Boston, and what he should have done is try to avoid the British blockade and avoid the British ships. Instead, he had been challenged by the captain in the Shannon, and so he heads straight for it. Anytime there's a ship at sea and a ship coming out of port in these days, the ship at sea has the advantage. Its crew, it's got its sea legs. Sailors go to sea, half of them, even skilled sailors, seasoned sailors, are seasick. They haven't worked the ship for a couple of weeks, maybe months. Where the crew, and these are complicated machines. Well, when he leaves port, and he does lose his ship, right? He leaves port, he raises a banner. Can you see the white banner? Yeah, hard to read in this illustration. Let's see the next one. Oh, can you read the banner now? Wait a second. One more. Oh, yeah, there it is. There it is. A free trade and sailors' rights. And he goes out and he fights and he loses the battle. Although, of course, as he's losing the battle, he says, right?
Don't give up the ship.
Don't give up the ship. Men, I've been wounded. Carry me below, right? And by the way, don't give up the ship. And then as the men are dropping like flies and they're being raked by the Shannon's superior gunnery and better seamanship, they give up the ship. But later on, we use this in the Battle of Lake Erie. Commodore Perry uses a banner, "Don't give up the ship." And Lawrence becomes a hero. And this is a quotation from one of the newspaper stories about Lawrence's death, because Lawrence dies. "A martyr for free trade and sailors' rights." Do you see why I say this is the most important phrase? These other phrases are all secondary. We've seized upon them. They've lasted in our history books. But this is the phrase that mattered. Well, Lawrence, the British are quite generous with Lawrence. They take his body back. They sail his body back to Boston and allow a crew to row out and pick him up. And as they're rowing back, the sailors have little ribbons on their hats. And on their hats says, anybody know?
Free trade and sailors' rights.
Free trade and sailors' rights. It's everywhere. And we've forgotten it. And we've forgotten it. And it gives meaning. It gives meaning to the War of 1812. All right, move on now. So Porter's in the South Atlantic, and he says, what should I do? He was fortunate. He had captured a British packet boat, which had $50,000 in gold, which was a lot of money in those days. And he says, I'm going for glory. And he heads for the